from the standpoint of others.
Any other questions about anything?
What was the reception of you when People's History came out? How did the historian public treat you?
There's a lot of looking with suspicion upon somebody like me because I'm not writing for them. I'm not. For instance, my book was never reviewed in the main journal of the historians, the American Historical Review. It was reviewed in the New York Times. It was reviewed in the newspapers all over the country. It was reviewed in magazines, but it was not reviewed in the professional historical journal. So there was a historian, a famous historian at Harvard, and he hated my book. Why? He said that I paid too much attention to the Indians. Oh, really? He probably read the first 3 pages of my book. I don't know. No, he must have done more because he didn't like what I said about Vietnam. He didn't like what I said about Nixon. He was for the war in Vietnam. He was a supporter of Nixon. And so he trashed my book. On the other hand, the reviewer in the New York Times, Eric Foner, teaches at Columbia University, he liked my book because he's a progressive historian. He has a point of view closer to mine. So whether historians liked or disliked my book depended really on their point of view.
Plus, I thought it was intriguing that a Caucasian would tell all kinds of history of all people, like black history and Chinese people and immigrants, and that's something our school books lack.
My name's Luke. We drove up from Atlanta to see Howard Zinn. We just drove up yesterday. It's about a 12-hour drive.
He said everything that was in my head, basically. Like everything I believed he was agreeing with, and he was expanding on it too.
I want to teach the truth to my students someday, so that's why I'm here.
Do you like folk music?
Oh.
It has the St. Patrick Battalion song.
Here I have this?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Dave. They will. Yeah, I appreciate that. I wanted, in writing this book, to awaken a consciousness in my readers of class conflict, of racial injustice, of sexual inequality, and of national arrogance. And I also wanted to bring into light the hidden resistance of the people against the power of the establishment. I thought that to omit these acts of resistance, to omit these victories, however limited, by the people of the United States, was to create the idea that power rests only with those who have the guns, who possess the wealth. I wanted to point out that people who seem to have no power, working people, people of color, women, once they organize and protest and create national movements, they have a power that no government can suppress. I don't want to invent victories for people's movements, but to think that history writing must simply recapitulate the failures that dominate the past is to make historians collaborators in an endless cycle of defeat. And if history is to be creative, if it's to anticipate a possible future without denying the past, it should, I think, emphasize new possibilities by disclosing those hidden episodes of the past when, even if in brief flashes, people showed their ability to resist, to join together, occasionally to win. I'm supposing, or perhaps only hoping, that our future may be found in the past's fugitive moments of compassion rather than in the solid centuries of warfare.
Peut-être ça va inspirer des historiens français de faire la même chose pour une fois et désacraliser tous les grands chefs d'État français. Donc peut-être on comprendra mieux ça et on peut-être aussi avec la perspective et le recul, on comprendra que l'histoire de la France ressemble assez à celle des États-Unis avec cette conquête de colonisation. Voilà.
You did heroic work. I think that I wrote a people's history because I was looking for such a history and it didn't exist. I was not at all sure I would go through it. It was a very daunting task, and several times I started to give up on it, and my wife or I said, no, you must do this. You must keep at it. And probably without her insistence, I might have dropped the idea, because the idea of writing a book which takes in all of American history and try to put it into one volume, well, yeah, it was a big job. Roz is actually my first editor. She's the only person I show my work to before it goes to the publisher, because she's a reader. She's not particularly a reader of history. She's a reader of novels, and she knows what good writing is, and so also she can look at history from the standpoint of somebody who is not a professional historian, and who can say, this doesn't make any sense, or this isn't clear, or you're going too far.
Anyone reading history should understand from the start that there is no such thing as impartial history. The chief problem in historical honesty is not outright lying. It is omission or de-emphasis of important data. The definition of important, of course, depends on one's values. We are not starting from scratch. There is a long history in this country of rebellion against the establishment, of resistance to orthodoxy. There has always been a common sense perception that there are things seriously wrong, and that we can't really depend on those in charge to set them right.
I always was